Right now on Morning News Now, ramping up raids. In a cross-country crackdown, NBC News has learned ICE made more than 1,200 arrests in one day. And according to a senior Trump official, nearly half of those detained don't have criminal records. What we've learned about so-called collateral arrests and who is being targeted. Plus, the Trump administration fires multiple DOJ officials who investigated the president. This as the White House ordered a freeze on all federal financial assistance starting today. We're breaking down what could be impacted. Also this morning, deep concern over DeepSeek. China's new AI assistant is rocking U.S. markets and has Silicon Valley on its heels. What you need to know about the previously little-known company, its product, and how it was able to match its American counterparts for a fraction of the cost. And $1 Million Woman will introduce you to the soccer star who's marking a major milestone after signing with one of the world's most famous clubs. We all love women's sports.
That is a great story. Looking forward to that. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin our show with the Trump administration's mass deportation of undocumented immigrants, which continues to ramp up by the day. On Monday, ICE says it arrested nearly 1,200 people across the country. Many of those are what are being called collateral arrests, people detained who do not have a criminal record. A senior Trump administration official told NBC News that nearly half of arrests so far have been collateral.
The surge in raids is taking an emotional toll on the families of those who are detained. This woman from the Chicagoland area says that her Mexican immigrant father was arrested, even though he has been a legal permanent U.S. resident for more than a decade. She said her father had a battery-related charge in the past, but was working with attorneys to try to clear his name.
He just told me they took your dad. I was like, what? I didn't think it was true. I was not trying to believe it. I was just talking, you're joking, right? It's not a joke. They actually came and took my dad. He doesn't deserve to go through this at all.
NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now with the latest. So, Julia, clearly ICE officials showing no signs of easing up on these raids and these arrests. Why are we seeing such a large proportion of these collateral arrests of people with no criminal records? What's ICE saying about that?
This was always the push-pull, Joe. Of course, the Trump administration knew they would get the most political bang for their buck if they went after the worst of the worst criminals, and they would keep telling the media about the kidnappers or the child molesters or the people wanted for murder that they had arrested. But of course, they also want to get those numbers really high because they're looking at cities like Chicago, where more than 50,000 immigrants came in during the course of just about 2 years, and they want to be able to get those numbers high too. So what happens is they might go in to arrest a criminal and arrest everyone in that vicinity. They also might, now we know they're doing workplace raids, which means casting a wide net to be able to report very high numbers. When you want to get 1,200 in a day, it's hard to make all of those criminals. I've been on those operations where they arrest criminals. It takes about 10 people to arrest one person. When you're looking at a workplace raid or going after any area where you're just going to get sheer numbers, the ratio of agents to immigrants gets far lower because they're not considered as high risk, and you're basically just going after geographic areas rather than individual people. That's where these collateral arrests get made, Joe.
Julia, we have also been following the situation at the Mexican border. U.S. troops have been deployed there. What's the latest?
Yeah, Savannah, we know that there were 1,500 deployed. They started arriving last week, and we do expect that number to rise. Now, so far, it looks like these troops are not going to violate the Constitution by actually arresting immigrants, but they're walking right up to that line. They're going to be able to provide space. They could be building detention camps on U.S. military bases. They could be transporting migrants, as we've already seen on military planes. And we also know that they're going to be used to try to build barriers to keep immigrants from even approaching the border to claim asylum. This is all part of a huge asylum crackdown that began last week, something that actually we've shifted our focus more to these arrests. But what's happening at the southern border is perhaps more dramatic because it's a complete shutdown of asylum, of the right to international right to claim asylum at the southern border. Savannah.
So, Julia, one of the biggest concerns surrounding these immigration raids and deportations is that sensitive locations like places of worship and schools could be targeted. Well, now we understand a group of Quaker organizations is suing the Department of Homeland Security for rescinding a policy that initially prevented those places from being targets. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. This is coming from a Quaker group who says that they don't want ICE to be able to come into their houses of worship that have historically always been very apolitical and sanctuaries, in the literal sense, a safe place. This is something that ICE rescinded in the early days of this new administration to say that they can go into places like churches and hospitals and schools. And we have this lawsuit, the first of its kind on this particular policy, but you can also see the ripple effects of the rescinding of that memo across America right now. There are corporations, there are healthcare facilities, there are school systems, all having emergency meetings about what to do if ICE comes knocking at their door. That policy rescission has had one of the biggest impacts just in terms of causing fear across the U.S. So far, we have not seen ICE agents go into hospitals or schools. Of course, we've seen them at workplaces, but that's something we have to keep an eye on because so far, ICE says, look, nothing's off limits here.
We know you're keeping an eye on everything. Julia, thank you so much.
Well, away from immigration, President Trump is also attempting to take wide-ranging action on the flow of federal aid.
Overnight, the White House ordered a freeze on all federal financial assistance. That includes grants and loans starting 5 p.m. today. Now, that's according to a memo by the Office of Management and Budget that was seen by NBC News.
NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins us now on this. Aaron, good morning. So what more are we learning about this freeze on federal aid, what it impacts? I imagine it's getting some pushback from Capitol Hill. Tell us about that.
It might be easier, guys, to tell you what it doesn't impact. We know from this letter from the budget director that programs, Medicare programs, Social Security disbursements, money that's sent directly to individuals from the federal government would not be impacted here. But according to this letter, things that are like financial assistance to for foreign aid, for non-government organizations, nonprofits, DEI efforts, what the letter refers to as woke gender ideology and the Green New Deal, those sorts of programs would be impacted by this freeze or pause in the flow of federal dollars into these programs. Effectively, it seems like any program where the money comes from the federal government through a nonprofit organization, through a state, through a local agency, those funds would be frozen in this effort. So we're thinking potentially housing programs or food assistance programs or any other sort of federal aid programs would all be subject to this freeze, it would seem at this point. The administration says, again, through this letter, that this pause is really designed to give the administration an opportunity to review these programs to see whether federal funding is being used in a way that is consistent with the new president's priorities. And as you noted, Savannah, of course, there has been pushback already. We heard from Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, the Senate Minority Leader, and as well as other Democrats in Congress on the appropriations committees who say that this is an affront, an undermining of Congress's authority to decide how money is spent in this country. Congress does have the power of the purse strings, and these members of Congress are saying that the administration is in violation of that.
Aaron, another headline, the president is purging the Justice Department of officials who worked on criminal investigations into his conduct. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, specifically, we're talking about the investigation that Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, led into the classified documents at the president's residence in Florida, the investigation into his efforts to overturn the 2020 election as well. There were career prosecutors and investigators who were a part of that effort, people who've been at the Department of Justice and the FBI potentially for many, many years. And our understanding is that the effort has been made to make sure that those people who worked on the investigation are fired. There are 5 former DOJ and FBI officials who told our team that this is really an effort to intimidate Justice Department and FBI officials, those who remain, to say that there should not be further investigations into this second Trump administration. We know we heard President Trump talk throughout the campaign about a weaponization of government and wanting to eliminate the potential for that. And this seems to be in line, guys, with that effort. However, there is some thinking from some officials and legal watchers who say that this is really an effort to silence folks who would be inclined to follow the rule of law as opposed to just getting in line behind the president.
Hey, Aaron, yesterday also, by the way, was Pete Hegseth's first day on the job, Secretary of Defense. I know President Trump also signed some controversial executive orders involving the military. What have you learned?
There were 4 different executive orders that were signed by the president late last night, as we understand it, as he was flying back to Washington from Florida. And one of these orders reinstates military service members who were kicked out of the military for not receiving the COVID vaccine. That was mandated by the Department of Defense several years ago, and all those people will be allowed to come back into the military. They'll receive back pay and benefits for the time that they were out. There's also an executive order that mandates the development of an Iron Dome missile defense system for the United States. Again, something that President Trump talked about on the campaign trail. One of the other orders really seems to target transgender people in the U.S. military. It doesn't immediately kick them out, but it certainly starts to create a framework and requires the implementation of a policy that would make it very difficult for transgender people to continue serving in the armed forces. And the other executive order, I believe, was one that eliminated DEI programs, as has been done across the rest of the federal government through executive order. Joe and Savannah.
All right, Aaron, thanks for your reporting this morning.
A new Chinese artificial intelligence tool is raising concerns from Silicon Valley to Wall Street this morning. It's called DeepSeek, and yesterday it became the most downloaded free app in the U.S. on Apple's App Store. Its most recent chatbot model was released just last week.
DeepSeek's AI assistant functions very similar to American-made ChatGPT. Look at your screen here in this side-by-side video. The two platforms even look the same. You might be familiar with ChatGPT. But after it triggered a major tech stock sell-off yesterday, China's new tool has some U.S. lawmakers and investors questioning America's spot as the global AI leader.
NBC News personal technology analyst Joanna Stern joins us now with more on this. She's also a senior personal technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Always good to have you with us, Joanna. I mean, for those who might be hearing about DeepSeek for the first time, which I think is most folks, walk us through what it is and what it does.
Well, you guys did a good job before explaining it. It really is like a ChatGPT competitor, a competitor to all of these new large language model chatbots. And that's why people are downloading it. Sure, they want to see what the competitor is. But really, the big thing here is that this is out of China. And last week, DeepSeek released its new model, R1. And many in Silicon Valley were blown away by this model. And they also released one in December. And so this company has been growing and growing and growing, some real mind share in Silicon Valley because of how good this model is. And it isn't just that it's good, it's that the company says, this Chinese company says, that they have used a lot less money to train and create this model than the US companies are. And that's why we saw the freak out yesterday on Wall Street.
Yeah, Joanna, dive into that a little bit more. Like companies like OpenAI with ChatGPT or Google with Gemini, exactly what they've been spending in terms of the tech itself, the housing of data, the space that's needed to use like just the computing power, and also just like what they're paying people and how many people they're recruiting versus what we know DeepSeek did and why that's so scary to these companies.
Look, we don't have all the numbers, but what we do know is that the U.S. companies have been spending tens of billions of dollars on creating, training, inference. There's lots of technical terms of how these models are made. What DeepSeek has said is they have created their models just with $5 million. And again, lots of good reporting, lots of people in the tech industry talking about, well, okay, DeepSeek didn't do this level of work on that model. They were also building off, it is believed they were building off of US models, open source models. So they didn't have to do all the work. But of course, this has put the big pressure on the US companies, Microsoft, Meta, OpenAI, Google, for why are you guys spending all this money on all these big chips and data centers when look what China's doing more efficiently?
You mentioned DeepSeek is a Chinese-based company. Is it like TikTok in that it could spark similar concerns over issues like national security or censorship? What should people know before they download it to their phones?
Yeah, so this gets a little complicated because DeepSeek is using an open source model, and that means that it's open source. Other people can go and get it, they can start running it, and they can start playing with it. Obviously, TikTok, very different. It's its own app. You're seeing people download that DeepSeek app in the App Store, but there are other ways to get it. So if they were to ban that DeepSeek app, there would be lots of other ways to get to the DeepSeek model. So it's not as simple as banning, and as Savannah knows, it's really not as simple as banning because we don't actually have a ban right now on TikTok. I would say on censorship, yes, you can go and test DeepSeek right now. It will not talk about certain restricted Chinese topics, Tiananmen Square, other types of things. But overall, what you're getting right now is the ability to test this app in the DeepSeek app. And there's probably no harm to doing that if you're not giving a lot of personal information.
Yeah, it's certainly concerning seeing some of the censorship stuff as it becomes the #1 app here in the U.S. Joanna, while it was causing some panic in the U.S. tech market yesterday, DeepSeek was also the target of a major cyber attack. Another big headline here, it forced the app actually to temporarily limit new signups. What does that mean for people who have it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have many details. DeepSeek as a company has not been talking very openly about what's going on there. But yes, we saw signups there limited. I believe even if you go to the site this morning, they're limited signups. So hopefully we will learn a little bit more about what might have been breached, what kind of data. But given the virality of this app and the popularity around the world, it's not surprising that they were being targeted.
Yeah. All right. Joanna Stern, thank you so much.
Let's stay on this with Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver and look at how this was shaking up the markets, as we've mentioned a couple of times. Caleb, good morning. Really something. I mean, we just saw this nosedive in the market. Several tech stocks had their worst day since 2020. Why did the markets react so drastically to this app?
This is a seismic shift. Joanna alluded to it. The fact that this company could produce an AI model that is equivalent or even better than OpenAI or ChatGPT because it uses articulated reasoning at a cheaper cost, that calls into question all the money that these big companies have been spending with companies like NVIDIA. NVIDIA is one of the biggest companies in the stock market. It was the biggest until yesterday. It had the biggest market value drop in history, over $600 billion wipe off of that stock alone. That calls into question how much money the Microsofts, Apples, Metas of the world have been spending with NVIDIA on these high-powered chips because AI and owning AI is the end game. And they thought if you just kept building bigger and better server centers and bigger chips, it would come to them eventually.
Good explainer for folks who were asking, I know me yesterday, what's going on here? I don't fully understand this. The Trump administration obviously paying close attention to this. AI investments, huge priority for them. How is the president and his administration reacting to what we're seeing with DeepSeek, this news, but also just what happened on Wall Street?
Yeah, the president saying yesterday this is actually a good development. This could potentially making the technology even cheaper. But when you look at where all the money has gone in the stock market over the past few years, it has gone to AI-related companies. It has gone to the big companies building their big AI infrastructure, spending a lot of money to do it. Joanna was talking about how much they spent. They spent $236 billion on CapEx last year. About half of that went to AI-related development. So if the technology is getting cheaper and can be made cheaper out of China and used open source and that anybody can develop it, that calls into question how much they've spent and whether or not we're going to get a return on that investment. If you don't think you own NVIDIA, it's probably one of the biggest stocks in your S&P 500 index fund. In a lot of the ETFs you own, it's one of the most popular stocks in the world.
It was interesting to hear the president make those comments when just less than a week ago, one of his first big accomplishments and something that the White House was touting was this huge initiative called Stargate, where they're spending billions. Once again, this kind of partnership with OpenAI, SoftBank, these companies coming together to, again, make these massive facilities. But if we're seeing this happen out of China, I mean, does that mean maybe that we've overvalued some of this in the U.S.? I mean, is this a bubble?
A lot of people have been saying that because some of these stocks, including NVIDIA and other ones in the AI space, have risen astronomically over the past few years. They've driven the stock market higher because they're such big stocks. Stock market is a weighted index, so that's part of the reason. But also the fact that this technology is now out there. Anybody can use it if they want through open source. That calls that into question as well. And you mentioned the Stargate investment last week, $500 billion pledged to develop AI server centers, to develop warehouses for the data, but also the energy companies that power these server centers. Those got sold off as well yesterday. So the whole ecosystem was disrupted heavily, and this is just the beginning. We're going to hear a lot more about developments like DeepSeek over the next few years. Yeah. This is the end game.
An absolutely massive site in a small Texas town, one of 5 to be built with that $500 billion, and you get news like this. That's Caleb Silver, thank you very much.
There are growing concerns in Southern California over how long it could take to rebuild following this month's deadly wildfires. More than 15,000 homes and businesses were destroyed. Some officials estimate just clearing out the debris could take more than a year. That's before they can even start to rebuild. NBC's Liz Croyd spoke to some residents who say they are frustrated by the slow pace.
As the shock of the Los Angeles fires wears off, for many, the daunting reality is settling in.
Overwhelming.
Yeah. And with that, mounting frustrations about the cleanup after the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers recently told residents it could take 18 months just to clear the debris before owners even begin to rebuild. That timeline leaving many families in limbo.
It's not feasible. How are people going to live in that timeline? How do people's loss of use cover them when they're still paying their mortgages, when they're now paying rents on top of it?
The governor says he's cutting the red tape, announcing an executive order waiving permits for the California Coastal Commission. Still, questions remain about the rebuilding timeline, the source of a tense exchange between President Trump and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass during the president's visit to the Palisades burn area Friday.
They want to go to work and they're not allowed to do it.
And the most important thing is for people to be safe.
They're safe.
The mayor vowing to speed up the process.
You have emergency powers just like I do, and I'm exercising my emergency powers. You have to exercise them also.
I did exercise them.
Because I looked, I mean, you have a very powerful emergency.
And if individuals want to clear out their property, they can.
But officials still saying it can take up to 10 days to clean out a single property with more than 15,000 destroyed.
Everybody's desperate to get back onto their property.
Palisades Community Council president hopes public pressure will speed up the process.
If they make us jump through the hoops that we normally have to jump through to build a house, it's going to take a long time. And there's too many houses that need to be built.
Liz Kreutz, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Let's check on things outdoors. It looks like snow squalls will be making their way through the Northeast. Let's get a closer look with your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lastman has the squall forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We do have some of those alerts up, of course, because we are going to be tracking a bit of snow, not just today, but into tomorrow, too. So here's what we've got right now. A couple pockets of snow. You can see some of these snow squall warnings that are up again for parts of Pennsylvania as well as New York. We've got winter storm watches downwind of the lakes and a couple of winter weather advisories as we gear up for some additional snow through the day today and into tomorrow, too, for some spots. Here's where the snow is currently set up, right in those locations across New York and Pennsylvania, stretching up into parts of the interior New England as well. But as we get into tomorrow, we'll see this kind of clipper system shift a bit more of that snow into our area. Now, either way, the squalls are going to be a little dangerous when it comes to travel. On the roadways, take it slow. You're going to want a little extra time. That'll help you out here as we get through the first half of today. And then you can see some of that snow working in for the second half of the day and into tomorrow across the Northeast. Notice we'll see most of that heavy kind of snow setting up downwind of the lake. So that's exactly where we're expecting the highest snowfall totals for folks. Maybe an inch or so, or maybe 2 inches for Boston to Portland. But otherwise, you can see 6 to 8 inches in some of the highest spots. Those localized amounts closer to the lakes, of course, in parts of western New York and Pennsylvania. Now, that's what we're going to be watching here through the day today and tomorrow across that region. Meanwhile, the middle of the country, you're way warm. This is a big difference from what we dealt with last week at this time, with that roller coaster ride of temperatures continuing over the next couple of days. So we've got 40s for Green Bay today, Minneapolis running nearly 20 degrees above normal. We've got Sioux Falls into the low 50s, along with Des Moines. Kansas City hits 50 degrees today, Indianapolis into the mid 40s. As we look a little farther to the east for tomorrow, you get in on some of that action. So 60s for Richmond and Charlotte and Atlanta. Notice New York, 46 degrees, still above normal for this time of year. You should be into those low 40s for folks there. Instead, we'll be a touch warmer. That goes for places like Memphis and Springfield, hang out into the upper 50s to low 60s. As we get into the end of the week, though, and into the weekend, we've got a little bit of kind of a cooler trend setting up. So Cleveland, you're into the upper 30s to low 40s for Thursday and Friday. But look what happens by the time Saturday rolls around. A lot chillier into the low 30s. We'll see 34 degrees for the high on Saturday in Milwaukee, 40s for Lexington. We see temperatures into those low 60s for Raleigh, and then even New York City will kind of be in that range of the mid 30s to the low to mid 40s by the time we get through the weekend and into the next week. Meanwhile, we've got another storm system that we're going to watch redevelop basically over Texas. This gives us the chance for some heavy rain. We'll even see a couple of chances for some severe weather. Tomorrow, marginal risk. Wind gusts are going to be the most likely issues for us. The good news is that tornado threat is low, but we will see the potential for some really high rainfall rates, specifically into the evening and overnight hours that give us that flash flood risk. So heads up for folks from Oklahoma to Texas into Arkansas. We'll see that band of heavy rain moving into the Mississippi Valley here, though, by Thursday. And you guessed it, more of that severe weather is possible. We will have a slight risk that day, though. So Houston to Alexandria has the potential to see some of those stronger storms, guys, and it will include hail and potentially winds and a couple of tornadoes.
Not snow, though.
Not snow for folks there.
There you go. They had that last week.
We know what happened last week.
Yeah. Thanks, Angie.
You got it.
All right, we are just getting started on morning news. Now, later this hour, the early results of New York's congestion pricing program and what it could mean for other cities around the country.
But first, for the first time in over a year, Palestinians are able to return home to what remains of northern Gaza. We have the latest from the Middle East next. Welcome back. The fragile ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas continues to hold as Israel opened northern Gaza on Monday for the first time since the war broke out, allowing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians to return home to the area. As these displaced people were waiting to be granted entry, President Trump told reporters that he wants to clean out Gaza and send Palestinians to Egypt or Jordan. NBC News correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian joins us now from the West Bank with more on the response to these remarks. Danielle, good morning.
Well, good morning, guys. And behind me is the West Bank village of Turmusaya. And what sets this place apart is the fact that 80% of the population here is Palestinian American. And they tell us that at least once a month, settlers from one of the settlements, like this one behind me, illegal under international law, make their way to the village, attack the people, try to set fire to olive groves and buildings, and there's nothing the residents can do about it. They say that the settlers feel emboldened under the new Trump administration, and they fear that the Israeli government is now laying the groundwork for the annexation of the West Bank. Now, Palestinians here, as have those in Gaza, have heard the comments made by President Trump that Palestinians should be transferred to Jordan and Egypt. And you're often going to hear this message that they would rather die on this land than be forced to leave it. We've seen hundreds of thousands of people return to northern Gaza over the past 24 hours, often to absolute ruins and rubble, but they are being reunited with family, parents and children who've not seen each other in 16 months. People are still digging loved ones from under the rubble, trying to give them a proper burial after all this time. And in the meantime, there are preparations now for the next hostage and prisoner swap on Thursday, followed by the next one on Saturday. This is all happening now as the Israeli government is confirming what Hamas has told them, that 8 of the remaining 26 hostages still being held in Gaza are indeed dead. News that their loved ones have been dreading for 16 months. We're also expecting a visit by President Trump's envoy to the region, Steve Witkoff, is expected in Israel this week. There are talks of perhaps Witkoff visiting Gaza, but it also could possibly coincide with the release of the first American to be released in this ceasefire deal. Savannah?
All right, Danielle, thank you. Well, Monday was a day of solemn remembrance in Poland as dozens of Holocaust survivors returned to Auschwitz 80 years after the camp's liberation. Survivors and world leaders honored the roughly 6 million Jewish people and millions of others who were murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has some of their stories.
The world may never see another moment like this. Eyewitnesses to genocide returning 8 decades after they were liberated. Eva Umlauf was too young to remember, but Nazi Germany's unspeakable horrors are embedded in her skin. She was tattooed before her 2nd birthday.
You are just a number, but this number is not only on the skin, this is deep.
Auschwitz was Hitler's largest extermination camp, a place where roughly 1.1 million were killed, most of them Jews. But victims were also Poles, gay men, Roma and Sinti, and Soviet POWs. For those who were not killed, humanity was stripped away.
Hundreds of thousands of Jews were brought here on cattle cars like these. They were given no food, no real bathroom. And when they arrived, families were torn apart. Some were chosen for work, but most were murdered.
This was called the selection in an area known as the Jew Ramp. Children, the elderly, and the disabled were singled out for gassing. The Nazis looked for twins for human experimentation. Others became slave laborers. Entire families vanished.
I held on tightly to my mother's hand in the dark cattle car for countless hours, while the cries and the prayers of 70 desperate women permeated my soul and haunt me to this day.
Tova Friedman arrived here when she was 5. At one point, her mother hid her among corpses so she wouldn't be killed.
I recall thinking, I will never let them know how much they are hurting me.
The Nazis tried to hide proof of their crimes, but the evidence is still here. Piles of shoes, glasses, suitcases.
Often 2 people would be sleeping in just one bed on these basic bunks. And in a block building like this one, 700 to 1,000 people would be crammed in at one time.
This gas chamber still standing. We're asked not to speak as we walk through. What could you even say? Now the Auschwitz Museum is preparing for a future without eyewitnesses by thinking about what people ask the elderly survivors.
They ask about emotions, and art carry emotion.
The museum planning an art gallery featuring pieces by prisoners and survivors. For now, these survivors speaking to a crowd including King Charles and President Zelensky at a time when anti-Semitism is surging. In 2018, 58% of Americans thought something like the Holocaust could happen again. Today, 76% think it's a possibility.
We will never, never, ever allow history to repeat itself.
Our thanks to Jessie Kurz for that powerful story. Only an estimated 1,000 Auschwitz survivors are still alive today. Well, still ahead, a former New York State trooper claimed he was shot in the line of duty, but prosecutors say it was all made up. How they claim he staged an attack next. We are back with the extraordinary story of a former New York State trooper who claimed he was shot by an unknown gunman, but is now being accused of fabricating the entire story. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro has more.
Just months after he received a hero send-off from the hospital, former New York State trooper Thomas Messia turned himself into authorities, accused of fabricating the shooting that had landed him there.
Shot fired, I'm hit. Westbound, Southern State, right before exit 17.
Last October, Messia radioing in that he had been shot while approaching a vehicle parked in the median of a Long Island highway. His fellow troopers temporarily shutting down the highway, searching for a suspect Messia described as black or Hispanic, according to police.
Tom's assailant remains at large and is an extremely dangerous person.
But police now say there was no assailant and that Messia staged the shooting scene to gain attention or sympathy for himself, according to charging documents, placing .22 caliber shell casings on the ground hours earlier, then shooting himself at another location before returning to the highway to call in the fabricated attack.
The shooter that we were all looking for only existed in Messia's head, in his imagination.
Why did you do it? The 5-year state police veteran resigned on Friday and has been charged with falsely reporting a crime, evidence tampering, and official misconduct.
After combing the scene of the alleged shooting for any shred of physical evidence, those searches all ended the same way. 9 shell casings, but no projectiles found at the scene. No tire marks. Not a single video that showed the Dodge Charger Messia claimed belonged to his shooter.
His parents, whose home was searched late last year, were also arrested, charged with criminal possession of a firearm. All of them pleaded not guilty and have been released as they await trial. The Messia's attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, telling NBC News, this case is a tragedy that was caused by unseen and untreated mental health issues, and now an entire family is suffering for it, as they usually do in such situations.
His selfish act wasted extraordinary resources across several police departments. He failed his brothers and sisters in law enforcement, and he failed his oath as an officer.
Our thanks to Valerie Castro for that report. State Police Superintendent Stephen James later called the trooper's conduct egregious, saying it, quote, harmed the reputation of law enforcement in general. Well, it is now time for our weekly mental health check-in, and this week we're discussing the impact of President Trump's crackdown on immigration Also, if becoming more zen through practicing yoga was on your list of resolutions, we'll tell you all about why it could also benefit your mental health. We've got board-certified psychiatrist and author of Practical Optimism, The Art, Science, and Practice of Exceptional Well-Being, Dr. Sue Varma, here to discuss. Dr. Varma, always great to have you with us. Good morning. So let's start with the impact of President Trump's deportation operations. We've been reporting on these ICE raids taking place. Let's take any politics out of it and just talk about the mental health impact of having that sort of potential, this threat hanging over you or a loved one.
Yeah, so the threat causes a lot of anxiety, and this can manifest in the form of having nightmares, of having hypervigilance, of feeling very unsafe in places that you once felt safe in, for example, a church or a school or a hospital. And the risk of both anxiety, depression, and then also post-traumatic stress disorder or even acute stress disorder, like in the moment, increases if you know somebody. So we definitely see that knowing someone, or even if you don't, like just watching the images on the news, or even the perception of threat. There are a lot of people who say, you know, I'm a permanent resident, I'm a green card holder, I'm a U.S. citizen, and I am still feeling scared. So definitely these are very heightened, stressful times for a lot of people.
Dr. Varma, also next up, we've covered so many side effects of popular weight loss drugs, things like Ozempic and Wegovy. A new study by researchers at the Veterans Affairs St. Louis healthcare system found they may be linked to a reduced risk of mental health and addiction disorders. Again, seems like we continue to see other positive side effects through these. Tell us about what the study found.
Yes. So it's really important to remember that this was an observational study. It was done through the VA. So the vast majority of people here are white, male, and over the age of 60. So whether or not these results are generalizable to a larger population, whether or not this is a causation, is something that remains to be determined. And we need further clinical studies that are prospective in nature, that are looking forward, that are randomized controlled trials. There was a study a few months ago in October 2024 that showed that it was quite the opposite. So that, you know, even though this study showed that there was a benefit to mood, to anxiety, to depression, lowering depression, that you might have less substance abuse, modest reduction in cravings and reward, which is all very good news. And I'm always open to new ideas. I also think that we need to take them in caution, especially when we have conflicting evidence that says this is quite the contrary. We're seeing a lot of people who have what we call anhedonia, which is disruptions in your dopamine system. Dopamine is meant for pleasure and reward. So I'm finding this to be interesting, but a little bit conflictual. So I'm open, but we definitely need more studies.
Very interesting. All right, this one we talked about a second ago, the power of yoga. So we know that practicing it can improve your physical health, but research is now showing it can positively impact both the structure and function of parts of the brain. Look at this headline, literally mind-altering. What does that mean? What do you make of this?
I am so excited by this headline because I'm a big believer in the fact that there are free, natural, cheap things that we can all do that don't cost money, that don't have a lot of side effects, maybe zero side effects other than feeling good. And we know that yoga causes changes on the structural level. So the hippocampus, which is involved in memory and learning, is boosted. You can actually see neuronal growth so that our brains are continuing to evolve at every age, 60s, 70s, 80s. So it doesn't matter how old you are, taking up a yoga practice can be helpful. It can be protective against neurodegeneration, which is very common. All of us are going to lose neurons. They say if you don't use it, you lose it. There's benefits to the amygdala, which is our stress and emotional regulation center. There's benefits to the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in planning and executive functioning. So every aspect of your brain, including self-awareness, introspection, the default mode network is something that is on when we're not doing an activity, and it has to do with self-reflection. And a lot of us have a tendency to ruminate, to worry, to just think about the same negative thing over and over again, especially in this day and age, right? There's a lot of pessimism. So if you want to be optimistic, if you want to be happier, even 10 or 15 minutes of a yoga practice, being intentional and deliberate, and it can be as simple as sitting and centering on your breath. It can start with that.
That's great news to hear. It can be as easy as that. Dr. Sue Varma, thank you very much. Good to see you. Well, here in New York, the country's first congestion pricing plan, charging drivers for entering the most crowded parts of the city, it's now in effect. And so far, it appears to have reduced traffic. Now, other cities are considering similar ideas. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has more.
New York's notorious for its traffic, but on this Monday, a pleasant surprise.
Traffic is way down, way down.
After a congestion pricing plan revved up earlier this month, charging most drivers $9 to enter this section of Manhattan.
People are saving 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes on their commutes getting in and out of the city.
The city's transportation chair points to a before and after of this normally jammed road to get to Brooklyn around 6 p.m. and to improved morning commute times since the change. Drivers taking the tunnel from Queens into Manhattan saw a 15% drop between 7 and 10 a.m. And the two major tunnels connecting New Jersey to the city saw 17 and 48% drops.
I kind of like how the traffic has reduced, but I think the prices are kind of insane.
These are the toll readers.
Aaron Gordon in Bloomberg News posted cameras at one corner before and after congestion pricing. They found no change in commercial or for-hire cars. Personal vehicles, though, did drop, but Gordon says it doesn't appear to disproportionately impact one income group or another.
There wasn't much of a change at all, either in the share of expensive cars or in the share of, median cars or in the share of cheaper cars.
The city says this plan has cut traffic accidents in half, so the streets are safer. The question is, how adaptable is this plan to other major U.S. metros?
We're hearing from cities all over the country about how we did it. We have much greater density than any other place in the United States, but we have a great transit system.
While no two cities are the same, a possible springboard for an issue that affects millions every day. Sam Brock, NBC News, New York.
Fascinating stuff, certainly a topic of conversation here in New York. Well, after a record holiday shopping season, the bills from all that spending are rolling in. Our Christine Romans joins us to break down the numbers on holiday debt and share tips for how you can tackle it. That's just after the break. Welcome back. Well, with the holidays behind us, it's time now to pay the bills on all that holiday shopping. Retail sales hit nearly $1 trillion over the holidays. It was a record. And with the rising popularity of those buy now, pay later services, more than a third of Americans say they took on debt in the past year. So what's the best way to handle all that debt? Well, we've got NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans here with some tips. Christine, good morning.
Good morning.
This is way less fun than when you were telling us about all the holiday deals.
I think it's fun, actually. I do think it's fun. And here's why. No one wants their head in the sand. You're going to get this taken care of, and then you're going to be ready to start saving for your summer vacation.
Okay.
That's why you want to get this done.
Okay, I guess that's a little festive looking. It's just, it was nicer when there were lights everywhere and stuff. How much debt did we take on?
So, about a third, more than a third of people have money that they still have to pay for their holiday shopping. About $1,181 on average, and about 21% think it's going to take about 5 months to pay off, and 20% are only making the minimum payments. You will not get out of debt and be saving for your summer vacation if you're only paying the minimums. So it's time to make a plan.
Let's talk about those buy now, pay later.
Sure.
Is that kind of how some people got into this situation? There's pros and cons.
Yeah, it's a new wrinkle, and there's a lot more money on these buy now, pay later. They're installment loans. So it used to be you just had to manage your credit card debt after the holidays, but now you have to remember that there are these buy now, pay later installments that'll be coming out of your bank account, either every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever the deal was. So make sure that you're factoring in your buy now, pay later loans while you're figuring out how to pay off your credit card debt. And you can even ask Klarna or Afterpay, ask your buy now, pay later provider if they can give you an extension if you're really in trouble.
Interesting. So if somebody is struggling to pay off their debt, I just wrote down, you said don't pay just the minimum.
Please
What
don't.
are other good strategies to tackle?
Record high credit card interest rates, record high store card interest rates. The first thing to do, think about either the snowball or avalanche method. The snowball is you got a bunch of debt. You take the smallest one, you pay it off, and then that gives you the psychological boost to take what you're paying on that one and pay it on the next one. So it's snowballs. The avalanche is you pay the highest interest rate first. This will save you the most money on interest. So you attack that biggest, highest rate first. Pay off store cards ASAP. 30% interest on store cards.
Wow.
It is insane. I'm going to editorialize here. It is insane how much they cost. Get rid of those right away because you will not get out of debt.
That's like a card that's specific for a department store or somewhere you shop a lot.
And you probably got 25% off that first purchase. Maybe you forgot about the card. You got to pay those off.
Sometimes it is tempting when they're like, well, you'd save $60. So I'm like, wow.
And the more of those you open, the riskier you look on your credit score. So you might lower your credit score, and then when you borrow money, it costs you more. So
I've always said no.
Just say no.
So you know.
Just say no.
Christine's judging me. If it's gotten really out of control, what other options do you have?
You know, you can call the credit card company, ask them to lower the interest rate. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you might be able to say, look, I might consider the 0% balance transfer. So you want to keep me as a customer. But you can transfer everything for a 0% balance. It's usually for 6 months. So make sure that you fix the problems that got you the debt. Otherwise, you're just going to, get in trouble again. And you can research a personal loan. SoFi and others have personal loans. Watch the fees, watch the rates. You might try to consolidate. But again, you got to change the behavior. Live a little bit below your means, pay more than the minimum, and everything's fine.
I'm saying this out loud so I remember it. I want to do a segment where you teach us what to say when you call, because I would just be so scared to call and say, hey, give me a lower rate. Like, why would they say yes to that?
Because they want to keep your business. They want to keep your business. Look, I want you to keep my business. I need you to lower my rate a little bit. Otherwise, I'm going to go someplace else.
There you go. All right. More to come. Christine, thank you. Let's stay on your wallet. Costco's facing some controversy over maintaining its DEI policies despite President Trump's executive order. We've got CNBC's Bertha Coombs joining us today with the latest on that and some other financial headlines. Bertha, great to see you. Hi.
Hey, Savannah. Yeah, let's start off with Costco. A group of nearly 20 Republican attorneys general are calling on the chain to drop its DEI policies, citing concerns about discrimination. Last week, Costco shareholders overwhelmingly voted against a proposal asking for a report on the risks tied to its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, pushing back against scrutiny of those policies. Now, Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird co-led a letter to Costco's CEO accusing the company of doubling down on policies they allege violate merit-based principles and federal law. Last week, President Trump signed an executive order directing the government to do away with DEI policies at federal agencies, contractors, and the private sector. Norway is on the verge of being the first country to fully transition to electric vehicles. Norway has long been recognized as a leader in green transportation despite its large oil and gas reserves. EVs have increased from less than 1% of total sales in 2010 to nearly 90% last year. The government set a non-binding goal of going fully electric back in 2017. And Wendy's and the Girl Scouts are teaming up on a new menu item. The fast food chain unveiling the Thin Mints Frosty, which combines the frozen fan favorite with the mint chocolate cookie. It will be available for a limited time starting on Friday, February 21st. Customers can get the Thin Mint-inspired swirl in vanilla or chocolate. Seems like it's something that should be chocolate to me.
Yeah, having a choice seems like it defeats the purpose of making it a flavor.
But I think we can all agree we like Thin Mint. That's the one thing that brings all of us together.
I'm going to disagree.
Oh, uh-oh.
I don't like minty things.
Fan.
Yeah, I don't
okay.
like
Yeah. All right.
Okay, thanks, Bertha.
Coming up, women's soccer marking a major milestone this morning.
Yeah, after the break, we'll introduce you to the sport's first $1 million woman who's making some major money moves overseas. Stay with us.
We're back now with everyone's favorite Australian cattle dog family. Of course, we were talking about Bluey, the beloved children's show, was the most streamed program of 2024, according to a year-end report from Nielsen. In the last year alone, the Australian animated series racked up more than 55 billion minutes of watch time on Disney+. Grey's Anatomy and Family Guy were the runners-up behind Bluey. Grey's Anatomy. Bluey ended its third season back in April with a 28-minute-long episode called The Sign, followed by a bonus episode that was titled Surprise. A release date for season 4 of Bluey yet to be announced, but a Bluey movie is scheduled for release in 2027. All of it exciting to any parent you know out there.
I was just going to say that.
Cannot get enough.
That's right. Exactly. All my friends with kids say that.
Bluey
I wouldn't know from personal experience, but I agree. Thanks, Joe. Well, finally this hour, a major milestone in women's soccer. One American player just scored a record-breaking deal. NBC's Steve Patterson has her story.
It's a moment that's more than a new player being introduced to fans for the first time. This is a moment history was made. Naomi Girma becoming the first ever $1 million women's soccer player by taking her talents across the pond to play for the storied Chelsea Football Club, a milestone reached in men's soccer decades ago. Girma calling the move an easy choice.
I didn't know this would be possible for me, and yeah, I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity.
She's been a dominant force in U.S. soccer, spending the last 2 years in the National Women's Soccer League and leading the U.S. Olympic team to gold medal glory in Paris. Girma's coach calling her the best defender I've ever seen. She started playing soccer at a club in San Jose created by her dad, an Ethiopian immigrant who saw the sport as a way to bring their community together. We caught up with Girma last year before the Olympics. She brought us to her favorite Ethiopian restaurant and reflected on the type of player she hopes to be.
I would just want to be someone who left their mark, I would hope, in a positive way and helped people feel included, felt like they belonged in the soccer world and, yeah, in sports in general.
Chelsea posting a letter Girma wrote to her future self. Keep challenging yourself, it says. Keep holding yourself to a high standard. And most importantly, make sure you enjoy it all. As you know, that's when we produce our best. Steve Patterson, NBC News.
Very inspiring. That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for starting your Tuesday with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, President Trump's immigration crackdown ramping up. Federal officials on the move in major cities, arresting hundreds of undocumented migrants. NBC News has learned many of them don't have a violent criminal record. We're going to take you inside one of those operations in just a moment. Some scary scenes in the skies aboard a United flight that suddenly plunged in the air shortly after takeoff, injuring dozens of passengers. Investigation now underway to determine what exactly caused the extreme and terrifying turbulence. Also this morning, Princess Kate is back in the public eye for the first time since revealing she's in remission from cancer. Her emotional appearance with Prince William honoring the liberation of Auschwitz 80 years later. And the brewing international tug of war that could see one of the world's most famous paintings taking a road trip, at least temporarily. I'll be bringing you that story later in the hour.
I cannot wait to learn what's going on.
It's a question of whether even France would let it go to Italy. A lot of early discussion right now. We'll see what happens. All right, let's begin this hour with the Trump administration's sweeping mass deportations of undocumented immigrants.
On Monday, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency said that nearly 1,200 people had been arrested in one day, but NBC News is learning that many of them don't have criminal records. NBC senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez got a first-hand look at one of the ICE operations and has this report for us.
This is the iconic Roosevelt Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, and it remains the city's primary intake shelter for migrants. Over the past 2.5 years, more than 230,000 of them have come to this city, and now the Trump administration is trying to deter any others.
This morning, an escalating crackdown nationwide on illegal immigration. Federal officers on the move in major cities. Newly confirmed Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in New York, watching this arrest just this morning.
How busy has this been over the past week?
Busier than we've seen in a while.
The number of daily arrests rising. A senior administration official telling NBC News ICE arrested nearly 1,200 undocumented immigrants in one day. Roughly half had criminal records, in addition to being in the country illegally.
If somebody is here illegally, whether or not they've committed, crimes, there is that possibility that they could be, arrested.
We saw one enforcement operation firsthand in Chicago.
We're now heading to the northwest part of the city. Yesterday, they couldn't find one particular 25-year-old from Mexico with a lengthy criminal history. But this morning, a surveillance team has just seen him at work, and that's where we're going.
Agents move in, arresting Christopher Lara from Mexico. ICE says he has a criminal record, including convictions for home invasion and aggravated battery.
This is the one that's coming in.
NBC News also getting rare access to an ICE processing center. where we found Lada, arriving in handcuffs. He denies the charges against him, saying he deserves a second chance.
I went to school my whole life here, from preschool all the way to my senior year.
He says if he's deported back to Mexico, he'd leave behind a 5-year-old daughter.
He does have serious charges and convictions. So I understand he has a daughter, and that's unfortunate, but we still have a job to do, and we still have to follow the law.
Meanwhile, after a brief feud with Colombia over accepting deportees, President Trump now threatening tariffs for any country that gets in the way of his mass deportation effort.
We've made it clear to every country that they will be taking back our people that we're sending out, the criminals.
But for the families left behind, it is agonizing. This woman's father was just arrested. He's lived here many years, she says. It breaks my heart.
Again, this morning we're learning of new arrests here in New York City, and more operations are expected in cities across the country in the coming days. Back to you.
All right, Gabe, thank you.
Beyond immigration, the Trump administration appears to be taking action on federal aid this morning. A memo seen by NBC News from the White House's Office of Management and Budget says all federal financial assistance will be frozen starting at 5 p.m. today. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander joins us with that. Peter, good morning.
Joe, good morning. This pause ordered by the White House Budget Office, as you note, applies to most, if not all, federal grants and loans. That's according to this new memo sent to agencies overnight. That could be trillions of dollars on hold, the document notes, and likely tens of billions in payments that Americans receive. Already, this is sparking fierce backlash from critics and confusion, with fears that it could impact those most in need, who are now asking themselves when the cash flow will stop. This morning, another sweeping action by President Trump as he remakes the federal government in his first full week in office.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Overnight, NBC News learning that the White House has ordered a freeze of federal aid starting at 5 p.m. today.
My administration has been moving with urgency and historic speed to reverse every single disaster of the Biden administration.
The new head of the government's budget office saying in an internal memo obtained by NBC News that the pause extends to, quote, all federal financial assistance and activities affected by President Trump's recent executive orders, including foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal. The memo says Social Security and Medicare will not be affected, and neither would payments directly from the government to individuals. But many Americans get federal funds on everything from loans to food aid to farm assistance indirectly, and it's unclear if those programs would be affected. The order says it's targeting the parts of the government that will be changed by President Trump's recent executive actions that could include everything from some efforts to lower prescription drug costs to clean energy jobs and programs. Congressional Democrats overnight saying the president's actions, quote, put the financial security of our families, our national security, and the success of our country at risk. The Trump administration argues the government needs to align with, quote, the will of the American people as expressed through presidential priorities.
We got rid of the woke crap.
It's part of a series of recent actions from President Trump, including executive orders on the military yesterday, focused on rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion, and recognitions of transgender service members. And he said building an Iron Dome-style missile defense system around the country.
We protect other countries, but we don't protect ourselves.
As for that pause right now to those federal programs, federal aid, it is sure to be contested, but many budget experts say the president is generally allowed to temporarily defer spending. Of course, Congress holds the power of the purse, and the Senate's top Democrat, Chuck Schumer, he fired back overnight. He said in part, Congress approved these investments, and they are not optional. They are the law. Joe, this is certain to be among the questions Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt faces from reporters when she holds her first press briefing here, 1 o'clock Eastern at the White House this afternoon.
Oh, you'll be keeping tabs on that, Peter. Thank you so much.
Well, now to the new Chinese artificial intelligence tool. It's called DeepSeek, and it's sparking concern from Silicon Valley to Wall Street this morning.
Yesterday, DeepSeek became the most downloaded free app in the U.S. on Apple's App Store after it just launched its newest AI chatbot model last week.
NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans is here with more on how this rattled the stock market. Christine, good morning.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere here, really, this DeepSeek, and essentially making waves in the tech industry and really raising a lot of questions about dominance in the U.S. in the AI space race.
This morning, the AI arms race now affecting your wallet as a new technology from a small Chinese lab sends big U.S. companies reeling. DeepSeek, a Chinese company, released a virtual assistant fueled by artificial intelligence last week. It quickly climbed to the top of the Apple App Store, fueling a dramatic sell-off of AI stocks yesterday.
It is mind-blowing, and it is shaking this entire industry to its core.
President Trump saying companies should be on notice.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win.
DeepSeek says its models perform as well as AI's biggest companies and is much cheaper to make, saying it spent $5.6 million training its model compared to ChatGPT, which spent $78 million. And Google-created Gemini spent $191 million.
And some of the companies in China were coming up with a faster method of AI and much less expensive method. And that's good because you don't have to spend this much money.
Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, posting on X, calling the DeepSeek chatbot impressive, but responded last month to fears about a superintelligence posing an existential threat.
I have faith that researchers will figure out how to avoid that.
DeepSeek says it collects users' keystrokes and stores information in Chinese servers. Lawmakers warning of security issues with Chinese apps.
They abuse the system. They steal our intellectual property. They're now trying to get a leg up on us on AI, as you see in the last day or so.
So NBC News reached out to DeepSeek for comment on the privacy issues, the intellectual property issues, and we have not heard a comment from DeepSeek yet this morning.
So help us understand why this is causing just so much panic on Wall Street.
I know, it was so seismic yesterday, a 4% move in the NASDAQ. That's a big one-day move, and all of these stocks went down. Look, these big companies have been spending a lot of money in these investments, maybe $1 trillion in investments over a period of years from the big American companies to invest in AI technology. If a Chinese company can do it for just a few million, does that call into question their business models? That's why there was so much concern yesterday.
Let's talk about what this means for all of us who might own some of these stocks. And by the way, whether you know it or not, it might be part of your portfolio, right. S&P, your 401k. Like, what does this mean for our money?
So this morning I'm hearing from a lot of Wall Street tech watchers who are questioning how this company could have done this for just $5 million anyway. So there will be questions about which chips were used and whether they were banned, U.S. chips that they were not supposed to have in the first place. So watch this space there. What it means for you and your 401k, here's some perspective. The S&P 500, that's probably what your stock portfolio looks like, is up 22% over the past year. That's a good return. If you invested $1,000 in NASDAQ, in tech stocks, 5 years ago, that $1,000 is worth $2,100 and change in those 5 years. Yesterday's sell-off was about $26. So that's kind of a wonky way to put it, but instead of trillions lost, trillions gained, if you had a $1,000 investment, it went up to $2,100 and it lost $25 yesterday. That's sort of the magnitude of the loss yesterday and the magnitude of just the enthusiasm over AI to date.
As long as you weren't all in on NVIDIA, you're probably good.
And if you've been all in on NVIDIA for a long time, you're still good.
Still okay.
Christine, thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
We are getting our first look at the chaotic scenes aboard a United Airlines flight that suddenly plunged in the air en route to Washington, D.C. Safety officials are now investigating what caused the extreme turbulence, which left dozens of people injured. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has the details.
On board United Flight 613, the aftermath of a terrifying few moments. Passengers holding tight to seat bags. The cabin littered with food and personal belongings. Ceiling panels damaged and smeared with drink residue. It happened just 90 minutes into the flight from Lagos, Nigeria to Washington as flight attendants were serving passenger meals. Flight radar 24 shows the Boeing 787 Dreamliner at 36,000 feet over the Ivory Coast when it experienced a sudden jolt, dropping 185 feet, then climbing more than 200 feet. Passengers and flight attendants went flying, some hitting the ceiling and reportedly unconscious. The pilot quickly announced they briefly lost autopilot and navigation and were returning to Lagos with ambulances waiting. The Nigerian Airports Authority reports 6 people were seriously injured. Another 32 treated for minor injuries. United tells NBC News the plane returned to Lagos after a technical issue and an unexpected aircraft movement.
This could have been something like cruise control in a car that suddenly disconnected and applied the brake. It would provide quite a jolt.
The NTSB says it's joined the investigation into what happened. Meanwhile, United says it paid for passenger hotels and meals back in Lagos before another plane could take passengers to D.C. The 787 involved remains grounded in Nigeria.
All right, Tom, thank you so much, and we'll be keeping an eye on the findings of that investigation.
Well, let's get to weather now. More snow is headed for the northeast. For all the details, let's check in on your Morning News Now forecast.
Angie Lastman is here. Angie, good morning.
Hi, good morning, guys. We do have the potential for some difficult travel across the northeast and parts of the Great Lakes as we gear up for some snow to work through. Notice the alerts that are already up. What you see in that bright purple, snow squall warning. That's where we're likely to see some reduced visibilities. We'll see some gusty winds across these regions over the next couple of days, but really some substantial snowfall rates. Now, accumulations aren't all that impressive, but still could slow you down. You'll notice those winter storm watches downwind of the lakes as well. For folks that are in western New York, you're already seeing some of that snow working through parts of Pennsylvania as well. And we do have a bit of that working up into portions of the interior New England area. As we get through the day today, we'll see most of that move out, but we've got this next clipper system that's going to shift more of that snow right into portions of the northeast. Of course, it'll be draped across the Great Lakes as well. It's a quick mover, so this isn't going to be a prolonged kind of event, but we will still see some of this kind of leftover snow, especially downwind of the lakes here as we get into tomorrow. Notice downwind of the lakes is exactly where we'll see those highest amounts. So more likely 4 to 6 inches, but some isolated spots up to 8 inches in that region. Meanwhile, the middle of the country is running way warm, a big difference from what we saw just about a week ago. We've got temperatures 20, even close to 30 degrees above normal. Places like Sioux Falls headed to the 50s. We've got 50s for Kansas City and Chicago today, along with St. Louis. Green Bay, you're going to top out around 41 degrees. Similar story for Minneapolis. But all of these temperatures are going to stay above normal across that same region here, even as we get into tomorrow. Notice the East Coast in on that action as well. Mid-60s for Atlanta. We've got mid-40s for New York City on Wednesday. And then we see a bit of a cooler trend setting up as we round out our work week and head into the weekend. Notice Saturday in Cleveland and in Milwaukee, we are back to those 30s. Then we look ahead to tomorrow and the next couple of days for some potentially severe weather across parts of the south. So we've got this southwest storm. It's going to redevelop right over Texas, brings us a chance to see some gusty winds across specifically parts of Texas for tomorrow. We'll also see the chance for some heavy rainfall rates, especially as we get into the later parts of the day tomorrow. So watch for the flash flooding risk. That'll extend from Texas into Oklahoma and parts of Arkansas. And then we see most of that heavy rain kind of set up right over the Mississippi Valley. This is going to leave us with, again, a little bit of a better chance of some severe weather for Thursday, specifically Louisiana and Texas. We'll see some of that heavy rain as well, though, guys. So flooding chances will be there as we tap into some of that Gulf moisture across this region. These are some spots that dealt with snow last week. This week, of course, it'll be the rain.
All right.
Thanks, Angie.
Got it.
Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, we're going to head overseas with an international tit-for-tat, so to speak, over one of the world's most famous paintings.
But first, after the break, Princess Kate's emotional return to the public eye after announcing she is in remission from cancer. Those stories and much more next. Welcome back. Princess Kate has made her first public appearance since revealing she is in remission from cancer. The Princess of Wales joined Prince William yesterday at a ceremony to mark 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. NBC News international correspondent Kelly Kobea joins us now from Buckingham Palace with more. Kelly, good morning.
Savannah, good morning to you. Yeah, this visit came as a bit of a surprise. The palace announcing that Princess Kate would join her husband, Prince William, at this event just a few hours before it started. As it turns out, Princess Kate has a personal connection to some of the survivors. A touching reunion for the Princess of Wales, warmly embracing Holocaust survivors at a memorial ceremony in central London Monday. Been thinking of you, she tells one survivor, calling another an old friend. A compassionate Kate making personal connections, holding hands.
You've been through such a hard time.
Meeting Holocaust survivors Stephen Frank and Yvonne Bernstein. She photographed the two with their grandchildren back in 2020. The palace posting those pictures side by side with the princess hugging them Monday.
She's warm-hearted, kind,
friend, like a friend. Asked her how she was, and she said, yeah, she was fine.
The royal couple appearing as united as ever.
William and Kate looked very close together. It's clearly something they were both very pleased to be attending, but there were little gestures between them, little touches of the arm.
Princess Kate also lighting candles with Prince William as he addressed survivors.
I'm honored to join you today.
It's the second official engagement for Princess Kate this year, meeting with cancer patients earlier this month at the same London hospital where she received chemotherapy as she slowly returns to public duties. On Monday, dazzling in pearls, choosing the poignant occasion to step out with husband William on their first joint appearance since announcing she's in cancer remission 2 weeks ago.
We are going to be seeing more of the princess in the coming weeks and months. I don't think we'll see her being quite as busy as she was prior to her cancer diagnosis just yet, because she is still keeping the focus on her recovery.
And Prince William and Princess Kate both talked to survivors about their desire to teach their children about the Holocaust. Prince William saying that Prince George is now old enough to understand better the events surrounding the Holocaust. Princess Kate asking one survivor if she was keeping a diary, saying that her stories need to be written, that the stories are still relevant today. Savannah.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much.
More international headlines now in East Africa. A Rwandan-backed militia group has announced the capture of a key city in Congo.
NBC News international correspondent Claudio Labonga has more on that and other international news for us. Hey, Claudio.
Hey, Savannah, Joe, good morning. Well, that's right. A rebel group called M23 announced they captured the city of Goma in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, it is considered a major victory for the militia backed by neighboring Rwanda and the most significant escalation in the conflict between the two countries in years. Early this morning, residents said the rebels still face pockets of resistance, especially close to the airport. But on social media, a spokesman for M23 said the Congolese military should now hand over their weapons and assemble in a stadium. M23 occupied Goma once before in 2012, but it was defeated shortly after. The rebel group now claims it is there to stay. Let's go to Denmark now, where authorities unveiled plans to boost military presence in the Arctic and North Atlantic region following President Trump's claim over Greenland. Currently, Denmark has limited and outdated military capabilities on the island, which is the size of France, but only has, for instance, 12 dog sled patrols. As part of the new security package, 3 new ships will be deployed in the Arctic waters around Greenland, as well as long-range drones and increased satellite capacity. The announcement came as the Danish Prime Minister prepares to meet the leaders of France, Germany and NATO this week to shore up European unity on Greenland. And let's end this tour of the world in India and China, where direct flights between the two countries have now been resumed for the first time in nearly 5 years. In 2020, diplomatic relations between India and China plunged to its worst in decades after an incursion by Chinese soldiers into a disputed border alongside the Himalaya. After dozens of rounds of negotiations over the years, the two countries finally agreed not only to resume flights, but also to improve access to journalists from both sides and facilitate pilgrimage to a Hindu shrine in Tibet. Sorry, guys, the tripod is about to fly away. It's very windy here.
Thank you, Claudio.
With the 2026 Olympics around the corner, a tug of war could be brewing between Italy and France over one of the world's most famous paintings. Some officials in Milan think the Mona Lisa should leave the Louvre and return to Italy, at least temporarily. This request follows some recent media reports in France suggesting parts of the Louvre are in desperate need of repair.
It's the biggest draw at the world's largest museum.
It's right there.
The Mona Lisa, a resident of the Louvre for most of the past couple centuries, a home that's more crowded than ever.
What would Da Vinci think of these thousands of people crowding around here to snap their selfies?
Now, some in Italy want to change her address. The Times reports the culture chief for the Milan region, in an official note, says we are ready to host the Mona Lisa, telling the paper Milan will host the Winter Olympics in a year, and tourist numbers would be extremely high.
There's a lot of Leonardo in Milan, but do they have greater rights than Florence? Do they have greater rights than Paris? Do they have greater rights than Rome? And I think they don't very obviously.
It comes in the wake of a leaked memo published in a French newspaper. In it, the Louvre's director reportedly cites a proliferation of damage in museum spaces, some of which are in very poor condition. Massive crowds are another concern.
And there's tons of people crowding and pushing around just to get a picture and a snapshot of it.
Last year during the Paris Games, the director told our Keir Simmons the museum gets 9 million visitors a year, so it has to cap daily numbers at 30,000.
You have to limit the number of people.
To keep the condition of visit, pleasant for everyone.
Italy would be happy to borrow Mona Lisa while the Louvre sorts out restoration plans. Renovations are something French President Macron will likely discuss today when he visits the famed museum.
It's the biggest cultural prize ever.
The Mona Lisa was painted by Da Vinci, the famed Italian Renaissance artist in the early 1500s. She is hung on the walls of French royalty, Napoleon, and the Louvre, except in 1911 when she was stolen by an Italian employee who wanted to bring her back to Italy. So how would she feel about returning today? Well, as always, what she's thinking is almost impossible to read. So the Louvre is not commenting on these reports about poor conditions or whether that is linked to the president's visit today. Also not commenting on that offer by Italian officials to borrow Mona Lisa for a little bit. Maybe we'll get some more clarity after the president's visit. But it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, what a drama. Love it. Coming up, a Hollywood-style heist playing out in real life.
When we come back, the race to recover some precious Romanian artifacts after they were stolen from a Dutch museum under the cover of darkness. Stay with us. That's next.
We are back now with the latest twist in an escalating legal feud. We've been telling you about this one. It's between Blake Lively and her It Ends With Us co-star and director Justin Baldoni.
A New York judge has now set a trial date for March 2026 and is scheduling a conference next week to address complaints about pretrial publicity and attorney conduct. NBC News Entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas is here with the latest details. Chloe, good morning.
Hey, guys, good morning. That's right. Attorneys for Lively are asking the judge to stop Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, from continuing to talk to the media and to also halt the release of communications between the two former co-stars. This all comes as a new audio recording further pulls back the curtain on what might have happened during the production of It Ends With Us.
Hey, Blake. It is 2 in the morning. Hopefully this does not wake you up.
In a 6-minute-plus audio message obtained by thedailymail.com, Justin Baldoni tells Blake Lively he's sorry for his initial lack of enthusiasm over changes that she made to a pivotal scene in It Ends With Us.
I'm really sorry. I for sure fell short, and you worked really hard on that.
Baldoni also telling Lively he's sorry about the sexism that she reportedly experienced on other productions, promising to be different.
Hopefully it's not been the experience with me. There's nothing more exciting to me like that I get to work with Blake Lively and have her, all of her. I mean, that's what I want.
Baldoni's team did not comment on the message. Lively's representatives also declined to comment on the recording, which surfaced shortly after her lawyers filed a letter with the court, accusing Baldoni's attorney Brian Friedman of misconduct, including making false and defamatory statements, which have the potential to prejudice a jury pool beyond repair. Friedman firing back. The irony is not lost on anyone that Miss Lively is so petrified of the truth that she has moved to gag it. The gag order request coming after Baldoni's team recently released this behind-the-scenes footage from It Ends With Us, claiming it contradicts Lively's claims of sexual harassment made in a legal complaint last month.
It's never meant to be.
Lively's representatives say that the footage actually supports her version of events and shows Baldoni attempting to kiss her, even though it's not in the script. Writing, no woman should have to take defensive measures to avoid being touched by their employer without their consent. The feuding stars appearing in public with their respective spouses over the weekend. Lively and husband Ryan Reynolds posting to Instagram with a friend and fellow actor, while Baldoni vacationing on Maui with his family, getting this birthday post from wife Emily, celebrating the man, husband, and father that you are. A bitter and sprawling PR battle, inching closer to a legal showdown.
Okay, so on Monday, a New York judge ruling that Lively's sexual harassment complaint against Baldoni and the film's producer and Baldoni's $400 million defamation lawsuit against her and husband Ryan Reynolds. It is going to be joined going forward. Legal experts say that it's very rare for a judge to issue a blanket gag order against an attorney, particularly in a civil case like this. It's one of the matters expected to be discussed next week in a court conference. And, you know, I think the biggest thing is it going to get to trial? We have a little over a year. A lot can happen and a lot of pretrial discovery. And Blake's team is trying to get Baldoni's team, right, it's very complicated at this point, to not put up that website I've been telling you guys about, to put out more of these voice notes and text messages and emails to taint this court of public opinion, which then they're worried could taint a jury pool.
Yeah.
All right, Chloe, a lot going on. Thank you so much.
Chart. All right.
Thanks.
We've got a lot of European museum news for you this morning. In the Netherlands, police are on the hunt for the thieves who pulled off an explosive heist at a Dutch museum. It looks like a scene out of a movie, ending with some precious artifacts stolen. NBC's Megan Fitzgerald has more on the race to recover them.
Under the cover of darkness, a group of thieves caught on camera blowing up the entrance of the Drents Museum in the Netherlands, stealing priceless archaeological artifacts that date back centuries. Police say the museum in the city of Essen was hit with heavy explosions at around 3:45 a.m., shattering windows and damaging surrounding buildings. Roughly 30 minutes later, police responded to reports of a burning vehicle nearby and believe the suspects in the heist could have been involved with the incident and switched out getaway cars. Here are the 4 items police say they got away with. This golden helmet that dates back to 450 BC, when the region of Romania was known as Dacia. The well-preserved helmet is thought to have belonged to a Dacian king or noble and was discovered by a Romanian child in the 1920s, according to the museum. And 3 Dacian royal bracelets, also made from gold and dating back to 50 BC. The museum calling the burglary a dark day, saying in part, in its 170-year existence, there has never been such a major incident. This expert saying it's simply unsellable. The whole world knows it, so they likely went for the gold to, I almost dare not utter the words, melt it. Art experts estimate the gold from the helmet is worth roughly $90,000, but the value of the piece, Romania says, is incalculable. Controversy stirring now over why these pieces from the National History Museum in Bucharest were in the Netherlands in the first place. Romanian Prime Minister Marcel Ciolacu says their government never actually authorized the transport of the items. He now plans to organize a crisis team within the government to locate the artifacts.
I guess it's, weighing the risks and rewards. Is it worth lending these very precious objects that have, again, a high monetary value? Can you trust another country with something that might have a monetary value to them, but not a historic value to them?
As a multinational effort to recover these precious pieces and find the suspects has only just begun. Megan Fitzgerald, NBC News.
Coming up, standing by DEI.
After the break, the growing rift between one major retailer and the LGBTQ community in Minnesota over inclusion in the workplace. That's next on Morning News Now.
Welcome back. In Minnesota, the debate over diversity initiatives is creating a rift between a major retailer and the LGBTQ+ community. Twin Cities Pride recently announced that it's excluding Target from this year's parade and festival, scheduled to take place in June. Target is based in Minneapolis and has long been a major supporter of Pride events, visibly and financially. Late last week, the retailer announced it was rolling back its DEI programs. DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. In a memo sent to staff Friday and viewed by CNBC, Target said in part, many years of data, insights, listening, and learning have been shaping this next chapter in our strategy. And as a retailer that serves millions of consumers every day, we understand the importance of staying in step with the evolving external landscape now and in the future, all in service of driving Target's growth and winning together. Target joined other companies dropping their DEI goals after the Trump administration started dismantling diversity programs at the federal level last week, moves applauded by many conservatives. But over the weekend, Twin Cities Pride called Target's rollback, quote, the straw that broke the camel's back, kicking the company out of this year's Pride events. NBC News has reached out to Target for comment on TC Pride's decision, but has not heard back. I'd like to note I voluntarily emceed the Twin Cities Pride Parade back in 2009, but have not been involved with the organization since. With that, joining us now to discuss this further is Andy Otto, the executive director of Twin Cities Pride. Andy, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us for this discussion. I have to ask, with Target being such a huge sponsor over the years, how hard was this decision for you?
You know, it was an incredibly hard decision. We've always had a really great relationship with Target, and gosh, they've been a sponsor since I could remember, which has been at least 18 years. So it was an incredibly hard decision, but one that needed to be made, unfortunately.
Do you hope this accomplishes, and do you worry that it could backfire in any way or create a slippery slope when it comes to partnering with companies?
You know, I think that this opportunity was a chance for us to say this stuff has got to stop. We can't be excluding, you know, minority groups here in the cities and in the nation. And we have to take a stand. Could other sponsors potentially back out of sponsoring? Absolutely. But our community shows that we're strong and that this was the right thing to do.
Target's, as you mentioned, played a huge role in Pride events for nearly a couple decades now. Can you talk about just how big, how much money we're talking about, how much support?
Yeah, you know, financially, last year, Target came in at a $50,000 sponsorship, but they were more than that. They were partners with us when we needed things to work our year-round programming. And so they've always been there. Their employees have always showed up to volunteer. And so this is a bigger hit than just $50,000. This is a hit to our community, our culture here in Minnesota. And so, yeah, there's always a worry that it could, you know, happen with another company, but we're going to stand strong.
$50,000, you've been doing a lot of fundraising just in the last few days. I understand you've raised from the community about $50,000 in the last few days. Is that right?
Yes. After posting the donation website, we were able to achieve over $50,000 in less than 24 hours.
How do you feel about that?
It's amazing to see what the community can do when you call to action on them.
I understand you are supposed to speak with Target today. Is that right? I mean, have you heard from the retailer at all since you made this announcement?
I do. Like I said, we've had a great relationship with Target, and I continue to have that open door with them, but I do have a conversation with them today, this afternoon.
What do you hope happens? I mean, is it possible you could change your mind and bring Target back into the fold? What would that take?
You know, I think that there is always an opportunity for things to change. And I would say this year, that's not an option for them. But I hope that this shows them the impact that these decisions have on the community, not just here in Minnesota, but across the U.S. And so my hope is that they'll take a look at this and we can work together to create a position where we're bringing these initiatives back.
Company-wide, Target has more than 400,000 employees. Many of them are in Minneapolis. That's where the headquarters is. What are you hearing from LGBTQ plus employees? Do they support this, or are they disappointed you made this decision?
All of what I've listened to from these employees has all been positive. They're happy that we made the decision and we made the stance.
We've seen reports even this morning, Costco is being pressured by some conservatives to roll back its DEI after it said it would not. So it's possible more companies could do what Target's done. Does that mean it's possible you would exclude other companies from Pride in the future? I mean, what's sort of the bar you're going to set now moving forward?
This is the bar, and you know, no other company is any different than Target. If they choose to make those decisions and put policies in place that could hurt our community, then we have to make that stand and we have to say no. And we are willing to make that decision. I am happy to report that the companies who have sponsored us in the past, Target has been the first one to make this decision.
Andy Otto, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now let's turn to the international tariffs that are becoming an important part of the Trump administration's foreign policy. Just over the weekend, we saw President Trump threaten Colombia with sweeping retaliatory tariffs after the country refused to accept 2 deportation flights. But if you're asking yourself how tariffs actually work and how they could impact your wallet going forward, well, we are breaking it all down for you this morning. Here's NBC News Now anchor Zincle Esamal with more.
I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich.
Tariffs are a major part of President-elect Donald Trump's foreign policy and economic agenda.
We want fairness from other countries. We have not been treated fairly, and we're going to get fairness.
Put simply, tariffs are a tax on goods from another country paid by the company importing them, usually to protect national industries or as a trade negotiation tool. Quick history lesson. In the U.S., tariffs started out steep.
You can say there were three distinct periods of tariff history in the United States. It's from, say, 1790 to 1860, when tariffs were the main source of federal revenue. Something like 90% of all federal revenues was based on taxing imports. From the Civil War to the Great Depression of the 1930s, we had tariffs for protection. Tariffs were raised to very high levels on a variety of imports, and basically those industries were protected.
But that changed in the mid-1930s.
Policymakers decided that high tariffs were not really good for the American economy. So from the 1930s all the way up to now, we've had a progressively lower and lower tariffs.
In 2018, President Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on China, an effort to reduce the trade deficit and boost U.S. manufacturing. The Biden administration kept most of these tariffs and, in some cases, even raised them on $18 billion of Chinese goods, though the move is said to be largely symbolic.
The 2018 tariffs do appear, as best economists can judge things, to have raised the price level by 1% to 2%.
Larry Summers is former U.S. Treasury Secretary under Democratic President Bill Clinton. He says the tariffs were not effective.
The evidence is that they made a small contribution to inflation. Tariffs tend to make the people in the countries who impose them poorer because they raise the price of what they buy, and that makes paychecks go less far.
But others, like Orrin Cass, chief economist at conservative think tank American Compass, say tariffs ultimately benefit the economy.
What we saw in 2018 when President Trump first imposed a lot of tariffs was there were some places where there was an effect on prices. A lot of times that was short-lived. When we do collect tariffs, if people do have to pay more, that's tax revenue that goes to the government. So we can use that to reduce other taxes. We can use that to reduce our deficit. We can use that to actually support the creation of more manufacturing here in the United States.
While the efficacy of tariffs is still widely debated, their international reach is indisputable. After President Trump's tariffs on China in 2018, the country retaliated with tariffs of its own on U.S. goods. Now, in 2025, Mexico is threatening to do the same after President Trump said he would impose strict tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada.
I think we may be in the midst of a sort of third big change in U.S. tariff policy.
And that's tariffs simply explained.
Our thanks to Zincle for that report.
Even more money news now. Workers at a Philadelphia Whole Foods are making history with a new union.
Look who we've got with us. CNBC's Bertha Coombs with that and other money news. Hey, Bertha, good morning.
Hey, Joe and Savannah, that's right. Workers at a Whole Foods store in Philadelphia have voted to unionize, setting a precedent. They are the first group to pull off a labor win at the grocery store chain. Amazon, which owns Whole Foods, has tried to fend off unionization efforts at its stores, as well as with its delivery drivers and warehouse workers. The Whole Foods workers say they are hoping to secure higher wages and more affordable health care coverage. Meantime, Google says it will update Google Maps to reflect President Trump's executive order to change the names of the Gulf of Mexico and Denali to the Gulf of America and Mount McKinley, respectively. The company says the names will appear once a federal mapping database is updated, and it has a long-standing practice of making such changes. In a post on X, Google adds that the Gulf of Mexico will remain displayed for users in Mexico, and users in other countries will see both names. That's not too confusing, right? Meantime, Papa John's is giving away free pizza in a promotion tied to the premiere of the new season of The Bachelor. If you have the same name as the woman who receives the first honorary rose from Bachelor Grant Ellis, you can get the heart-shaped First Impression pizza. Fans named Christina, Ella, Natalie, or Zoe are among those eligible for the deal, as long as the spelling of their name matches that of the contestant. You must be a Papa Rewards member, and the chain will post updates on its official Instagram page.
Okay.
Sorry, I meant to
I
say
love
that.
Papa John's.
I'm just thinking how the name Bertha never comes up.
Same with Savannah, because everyone thinks it's Samantha.
Right?
Yeah, I feel your pain, but I never can find the magnet, with my name.
I just wonder if the real people who are on the show are getting the pizzas now, too. They're like, hey, I'll get one.
They
All right. Bertha, thank
Take
you.
them up on that. Thank you.
Coming up, Homeward Bound.
That's right. After the break, the heartwarming story of a lonely pup who spent more than 1,000 days in shelters right here in New York before finally finding her forever home. You got to see this. Stay with us. It's up next. Welcome back. It turns out Reese Witherspoon, of course, made quite the convincing case as Elle Woods in the movie Legally Blonde. But contrary to some beliefs, the actress is not actually a lawyer. On a recent episode of The Graham Norton Show, Witherspoon recalled a jury duty experience where she was chosen as a foreman just because she had gone to law school. In response, Witherspoon said, quote, "Y'all, this is really upsetting. I definitely did not go to law school. I didn't finish college." Important to separate fact from fiction. In all, Witherspoon says the case took about 2 weeks. I'm so excited for her new movie coming out with Will Ferrell. Well, a historic West Texas schoolhouse that closed its doors in 1965 has now been designated a National Historic Site. This recognition for the Blackwell School comes after a dedicated group of alumni campaigned for it to be acknowledged as a key part of America's Latino history. NBC's Priscilla Thompson reports.
A celebration of Mexican heritage in a place that decades ago sought to strip students like Joe Cabasuela of that culture.
That's you.
Right here, a little skinnier, but that's me.
Between 1909 and 1965, Joe and hundreds of other Mexican-American students attended the Blackwell School, a segregated campus for Latino students in Marfa, Texas.
They would say, "Where do you go to school?" "I go to Blackwell." "Oh, you go to Blackwell, the Mexican school."
Joe remembers classmates who were like family and teachers who cared, but also secondhand textbooks with missing pages being paddled for speaking Spanish.
It was around this area right here.
And the day students were forced to lay their native language to rest.
She had like a coffin made out of a cardboard box.
A coffin?
Coffin, yeah. We wrote a bunch of little paper, and we say, "I won't speak Spanish anymore," and put them in the box and buried it. And a lot of the school kids got offended because they said, when you bury something, it's gone.
What did your parents think when you told them about that?
I never told them.
Secret memories, now on display. The Blackwell School, named America's newest National Historic Site.
It makes us, as like a community, feel seen.
It's just a reminder of what we've been through.
Sometimes we don't see that history in our textbooks nowadays. Well, now we get to live it.
Why is this space significant, not just to this community, but to the nation?
So this site is one of the last tangible reminders of a Mexican school that tells a story of separate but equal.
The site, only the second ever to be dedicated to modern Latino history, Parks historian Cristobal Lopez says, part of a larger push towards inclusivity. In recent years, the National Park Service honoring sites that tell the story of Emmett Till's murder and the internment of Japanese Americans.
The United States is a very diverse country. There's multiple histories, and our national parks need to reflect that.
History that Blackwell alumni fought to enshrine for future generations.
Why did you feel it was worth saving?
Well, that was our last part of Hispanic or Mexican history that's still alive here. And I felt real strong about it.
Priscilla Thompson, Marfa, Texas.
Finally this hour, after more than 1,000 days in the shelter system, look at this guy. A dog found her forever home. Reporter Greg Circle from our New York affiliate has the heartwarming story.
The Southold Animal Shelter's director loves all her dogs, but Gabby Straup has a soft spot for those dogs forced to wait a bit longer to find a new home.
Anything that's been sitting in a shelter for a while, I feel badly for them, especially if they're a little bit older, if they're getting looked past, but they're actually good dogs.
Violet was one of those dogs. The 5-year-old mixed breed had been labeled unfriendly to other animals and spent more than half her life in shelters. But after Violet arrived here in Southold last December, Gabby Strop saw something different.
As soon as I saw her running around with the other dogs, I said, this is not going to be hard. This is going to be easy. We're going to be able to place her.
Gabby then asked the Patch News website and writer Lisa Finn to post this cry for help for the dog that had spent over 1,100 days in shelters. That changed Violet's life.
There's her face just looking up at you, and it was just so, it just grabs you.
Debbie Rutherford saw the internet post just days after losing her 14-year-old dog, Ginger. Debbie wasn't really thinking of taking in another dog until she recalled her final message to Ginger.
I remember looking at her and saying, well, if you see anybody else that needs our love, just send them my way and give me a sign. And all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, Ginge, I got you. This is the one you're talking about.
Debbie and her husband went to meet Violet just days later, and it was love at first sight.
It was like we knew she was ours. She just came up, she started kissing us. She was just so happy.
Violet is now Debbie's shadow, and the dog once labeled unfriendly to other animals is even best friends with the Rutherford's cat.
Or when they've been sitting in a shelter for 3 years and they deserve a home, it's a much bigger feeling when you get them into that home.
Gabby Strop hopes that Violet's story will lead to more adoptions of older dogs. Debbie Rutherford says there's no better feeling.
Oh, my goodness. Our thanks to Greg Sergel for that report. It's a great reminder that those older dogs are in need of good homes, too, and they can make some of the best companions. And also, sometimes their behavior in a shelter isn't what it's going to be like when they're in a nice, cozy home. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Don't go anywhere, though. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.